Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of Best Research Practices. So today I'll be talking about the topic of writing and publishing a research paper. In the previous video, I discussed the research process, and the next videos I'll be looking at is recommended tools in part 3 and part 4, hosting reading groups. So if you are interested in these topics, please do check out our YouTube channel. So for today's topic, I've divided my sections up as follows. I'll start by talking about finding a research journal or target journal, then how to construct and write a research paper to be accepted for journal publication, and also the idea of surviving peer review. I'll end this video with my conclusion and references. So now you have done your research and you have found some interesting results that you would like to share with your community. To do this, you will publish it in a research journal. And similar to the comments that I made in the previous video, quality here is the key. You want to look at things such as the impact factor or the type of researchers that publish in your journal that you're thinking of, or maybe look at the journals where they publish in. Because if you do want your results to be taken seriously, you need to publish it in a high quality or high impact journal. So then moving on, how do you actually write a research paper? How do you structure it? Well, actually, this is determined by the guidelines that are set out by your journal that you're aiming to publish in. So do read their guidelines and make sure you understand everything. They will have specifications about the type of structure that they want, and relating things such as the type of figures that you can add. So do make time to understand the guidelines of your target journal. But for today's presentation, I will give a broad outline for how a research paper should look. Okay, let's start with the title then. So the title should be clear, concise, and descriptive in terms of the topic that you're publishing in and the result. So if you imagine you've written up a research paper, you've chosen a title for it, and it is published on a research journal's webpage, for example. And a fellow researcher is looking on a certain topic, and let's suppose for this example, your paper happens to actually be related to it. And as your fellow researcher is looking through the research publication website, they're looking at many different papers, and they're probably only looking at the titles initially. So you want a title that's impactful and that will potentially grab their attention. Now, supposing you've done this, the next thing that they will look at if they have interest in your paper is the abstract. So the abstract is also very important. It's about a paragraph long, and it will contain a more detailed description of the results that you have found in your paper. So make sure it is well written, to the point, because if the results are interesting and your fellow researcher is interested in the results, they will read your paper and hopefully cite it. Next, we'll move on to the introduction section. So the introduction will be very similar to the introduction section that I mentioned for the research proposal in the previous video. It will largely come from your literature review and will paint a good picture of how your research fits into your field, and also provides motivation for why you have studied the research question you have. Then moving on, you will write your methodology. So the methodology will outline the steps that you have taken to answer your research question and to have achieved the result you have. So this is very important, because if another researcher wants to replicate your results, they will go to your methodology section. So it needs to also be very clear, like a detailed recipe for them to follow, and they should of course be able to recover the same result that you have. Then in the results section, as the name implies, you will state your results. Be clear, be concise, and avoid using vague language. So just as an example, you might, I don't know, give a description of temperature, and use the term higher temperature. Well, higher is ambiguous. Two people might have different notions of what is meant by the word higher. So instead, state the temperature and give a quantitative result. Say the temperature is 103 degrees, for example, Celsius. It's clear everyone is on the same page. Then once you've stated your results, you move on to the discussion section. And this is the section that is the most difficult to write and leads to the most leads for the reason why papers often get rejected by the journal. So often the discussion is written too weakly. So make sure you spend a lot of time here writing a detailed discussion of what your results mean. It's worth it here to spend a lot of time. Finally, you'll move on to the conclusion section, and here you will give things such as future directions of research that maybe stems from your results. The conclusion section, by the way, should not just be a repetition of your results section. It really should just give it the scientific context that it needs and moves into this idea of, okay, what future research questions look interesting from your results. Finally, you should state your references, of course, and this will largely come from the introduction section that you have written. As with the research proposal, it shouldn't be bloated. Don't try and put too much references than are needed. It should just complement your paper well with the key papers being featured that were necessary for your results. So in case you are interested in looking or reading more about this topic of structuring a scientific paper, I highly recommend the article 11 Steps to Structuring a Science Paper Editors Will Take Seriously by Angel Borja. He gives some excellent advice and tips and even presents some very nice examples for bad titles for research papers or why papers sometimes get rejected. So do take a look at this article if you're more interested. But finally, let's discuss the peer review process. So you've written your research paper and you've sent it to the journal. So the next step that happens is the journal will give it to their own internal referee committee that consists of academic and industry experts that know a lot about the topic that you have written on. And they will be able to assess for correctness. Is your results correct? Have you perhaps made an error? So bear in mind that the journal also has to maintain very high quality standards. So they will be very pedantic about your writing style. Have you met the journal's guidelines that I've previously mentioned? But once this is done, they will then, of course, give you feedback on whether your paper has been accepted or not. And sometimes if your paper has been accepted, they may still suggest small changes. So for example, with the title, they may think it's perhaps not sufficiently descriptive. You could say more in terms of your title, things like that. But this is certainly the most difficult part for getting your paper, of course, into the journal is surviving peer review. And with that, I would like to conclude this presentation. So I've discussed several aspects of writing and publishing a paper, starting with finding a target journal. Again, quality is key. You want to publish in high impact journals. Then moving on to how do you actually write a research paper? I gave a very broad outline of how a research paper should look with some brief descriptions of each section. But remember, always follow the guidelines that has been set out by your research journal that you're trying to publish in. And then lastly, I gave some very brief comments about the peer review process, which consists of a committee that very carefully goes through your results and will determine, is it up to the quality standards of the journal? Is your results correct? So then finally, I would like to just quickly provide my references in case you wanted to read more about the points that I've mentioned. Thank you for your time. And if you are interested in more videos from our channel, please be sure to visit our YouTube page. Thank you very much.